Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we are celebrating our 100th episode here at the About the Labor podcast. Somehow we've done roughly about 100 hours of Vikings content, hashtag content. We're pretty happy with that. So we'll start the show by talking a little bit about that and what we'll keep it short, though. That won't be a big part of this podcast for sure. We'll pat ourselves on the back for a little bit, as we're supposed to do when we get to 100 episodes. We'll talk a little bit more about the most recent game against the 49ers, kind of after film study type of thing, what our final takeaways from that game are. Also, it's Teddy Bridgewater. If you're downloading on Wednesday, it is officially the 1-year anniversary of Teddy Bridgewater's injury. We'll talk a little bit about that and kind of how far the team has came since that injury. And then we'll finish up by doing a little preview of the Miami Dolphins game on Thursday. Obviously, it's week 4 of the preseason. Nobody's too hyped about, the actual scoreboard or the results of the game, but there are some guys that'll be fighting for their lives and their livelihood, I should say, out there on Thursday. So we'll do a little preview of that. Obviously, we're a little bit short week here, so we're working on a little bit of a different schedule than usual. So that's the game plan for today. Let's start by knocking out our word from our sponsor, as always, Black Stack Brewing. Brand new brewery smack dab in the middle of Minneapolis and St. Paul with a wide range of clean and flavorful brews and a massive, bright tap room, perfect for intimate settings, all the way to special events. Black Stack Brewing, 755 North Pryor, just off of Menards. North of Menards, off of University Avenue. And then shout out to our sponsors over at the Twin Cities Directory, the best way to explore delicious bites to fun-filled nights in Minneapolis and St. Paul, what they have to offer. Check it out at www.twincities.directory. That's www.twincities.directory, helping you discover the real Twin Cities.
By the way, I'm going to vouch for this tap room at Black Stack. So I got to go there and watch the Vikings 49ers game there. That place is pretty sweet, and that screen is legit.
It would definitely be a rockin' party if we got, just a fraction of Vikings Twitter or just whoever's listening to this podcast.
It's perfect for that.
It really is. So we'll probably be working with them on coming up with some events and stuff like that. So highly recommend checking them out. And obviously Thursday wouldn't be the worst time to do it either for a Vikings game. Should be a lot of fun. I can't promise I will be there, but I think that you should be there because, like I just said, massive bright tap room, clean and flavorful brews. What's there to lose? There's a nice little rhyme by me right there. Unintended, actually. Completely unintentional. But, all right, so, Drew, we are at 100 episodes. We've been working together for far too long. It's been about a year.
Yep.
What are your takeaways here? Your bright, shining moments, your lesser moments. What are you What are you thinking about in this time of...
We did not expect this to blow up the way it has. We didn't expect to have a sponsor like this. We didn't expect to have, the type of following and the type of numbers we have. So that's a shout out to all the listeners. And I think we're only going to go up from here. We're trying to branch out now into more than just podcasts. For those of you who aren't aware, we're looking to do some live video pregame shows for every regular season game this year. I'm assuming there'll be some kinks out in the first one, but stick with us, and it should be a great time. And so we appreciate everybody listening. And obviously, BJ, you're okay at this. You're okay at the producing. You're fine.
I'm okay.
Pretty meh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Up
but
and
I
down.
think we've done okay. I think there's like 150 million Vikings podcasts out there, so. I appreciate the listeners for choosing ours because,
There are a lot of options out there, so we do appreciate you guys, either being in part of your Vikings podcast rotation or maybe we just happen to be the one that you chose. Either way, we appreciate you guys listening to us 3 times a week. That's a commitment. We basically are in a relationship now, us and you guys, the listeners. So thanks so much for doing everything you do and giving us the questions to answer or the thoughts to spike conversation or all the things that you do. We do truly appreciate it, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun out there knowing that someone likes to listen to Drew and I do basically what we did before we had a podcast, and that's just analyze the game to ourselves. So anyways, let's actually analyze the football here. Let's talk a little bit. Let's start off with the Teddy Bridgewater injury. I think that's probably the least that's probably the conversation that will probably be the shortest segment here on this particular show. Like I said in the introduction, it is the 1-year anniversary of the Teddy Bridgewater injury as of this posting. Drew, I know you were looking back at your tweets from around.
Yeah, I
this
can read
time
some of
last
those
year.
off. They're kind of funny.
Yeah, let's hear. What are you? We'll start off with this. What are your takeaways from the Bridgewater injury 1 year later?
1 year later, okay. Well, you can't ask for much better handling of the trade from
I agree.
looking at the way the Vikings managed it.
Let me cut in real quick and kind of simplify this question even more. 1 year later, you're looking back on this trade, since you did bring it up, are you happy with this trade? Do you believe it was the best possible choice the Vikings had at the time, now with hindsight bias?
I mean, we'll never know exactly what was possible, what trades, what moves were available, I mean, I hate to bring this guy up because it's Jason Brown's favorite, but Brian Hoyer in Chicago, if that was possible, it obviously would have been a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
And it would have been somebody I would have liked to bring on. He maybe would not have been as elite of a passer as Sam Bradford, but I think the Vikings would have managed similarly last year.
His game would have been. We saw what Kyle Shanahan tried to do with him last week against San Francisco. I mean, he's a vertical passer, so there would be some. I'm poking holes in your theory right here, just essentially to also say that for me, I believe this trade was the best move the Vikings could have possibly made.
Right.
I'll go on record saying I wasn't thrilled about it. I was
Initially?
actually driving back to Bismarck to go back to do my real job at the time. And when this news hit, and our boss at the time, Aldo Gandia, texted me up and was like, "Dude, did you just see what happened to Teddy Bridgewater?" And then, of course, I got a text from Drew, who's going to write the article? That type of that was what was going through my head at the time. And just, man, I can't believe that there's even rumors that he might get back to the 53 after the reaction that we had to that injury. I mean, we thought that he could possibly die. That was a real thing.
That was actually that was a real rumor floating around on the internet when this was all going down. There are so many different things that came up. There was leg amputation.
Yep.
There was actually what happened, an ambulance did show up, which that usually doesn't happen in a serious knee injury. An ambulance pulled up. You had the whole visual of players throwing up as it happened. There was rumors that
which
happened.
Which is pretty standard for practice, for what it's worth.
Right. Which, yeah. So, I mean, there were so many. Nobody knew what to think. We kind of knew it was scary, but right. I think the scariest part, at least for me at the time, I mean, obviously Teddy Bridgewater, phenomenal human being. We get that, and Mike Zimmer even said, I think just right after this, that the nicest kid in the history of life, or whatever you said. So obviously we get that, but from a football standpoint, the Vikings had Shaun Hill as their quarterback after this, and that was their only quarterback, I think. Well, Joel Stave was on the roster as well, but you had Shaun Hill and Joel Stave as your quarterbacks, so it was not looking.
Not a whole lot you could do.
Specifically predicting 5-11 as a record after this injury.
I mean, you look at what the Vikings were able to do given what they had, given the situation. Then you also look back at this past draft. The Vikings would have been picking 15th overall, I believe. I mean, you're not going to – in this position, when you're drafting, if you don't have Sam Bradford on your roster, probably draft a little bit higher. Yeah. Then you're considering Mitch Trubisky as one of your options. Also, Deshaun Watson, I would probably assume as well. I mean, obviously the Vikings could have picked someone else and then, tried to neutralize the circumstances through the draft with, I don't know, a later, like a Josh Dobbs type, a guy that Drew really liked coming out in the later rounds, or you could go with Taylor Heineke and you could use that, that first round pick on something completely different. We'll never know what the answer will be, but I do think the Vikings did a good job. They kept Rick Spielman kept the team competitive last year. Sam Bradford has come in this preseason, and while he hasn't been great, obviously the team is struggling to put points up on the board, but he has this team set to compete for a division championship again. And honestly, as fans, that's really all we should be asking for. Given that we're not a team that has won a ton of Super Bowls in the past, we're not really a fan base that has the right to say Super Bowl or bust. I think that if Sam Bradford carries this team into the playoffs, shows some resolve from last year coming off that 8-8 season, guides this team to the postseason, maybe wins one game, maybe wins in the wild card round or something like that, that's a successful season, and that makes a successful trade, at least from a business standpoint. From a fan standpoint, I mean, I know everyone's starved for a Super Bowl, but you got to understand the circumstances here. The Vikings got dealt a major, like a franchise-altering blow, and they've basically came out, potentially not stronger than they were before with Teddy Bridgewater at the helm, but they're at least around the same spot where we thought they would be heading into this season with Sam Bradford as the quarterback.
Right.
Now.
Well, and now, I mean, the way it plays out, instead of basically just mailing it in for a year or two, I guess it could be with his injury, you get a guy that can at least keep him competitive, and then there's still the possibility there of Teddy coming back and being the franchise guy. We don't know what the plan is. It's still super. I mean, we don't really know Teddy's recovery, where he's at. There have been rumors flying around, but none of them have been proven to be reliable. So, what we know now is that the Vikings were able to deal with a horrific injury to the most important position on the field, able to bring in a guy who can, at the very least, maintain that similar level of quarterback play, keep the team competitive, and then they at the end of this, if they choose not to pay Sam Bradford, financially they could be out of this just after paying him for 2 years. And this draft class they have this year, they gave up the first round pick, but they got a first round talent in Dalvin Cook, and then they got another second round talent in Pat Elflein in the third round. So they made up for it there. So
and a third round talent in Jaleel Johnson.
Right there. So, I mean, they did pretty well for themselves all around. If you consider the draft, you consider the trade, you consider the kind of level quarterback play. But this whole thing, I just remember that day, man. I went to golf practice, and I just couldn't believe what I was in shock. I couldn't even putt or hit a golf shot. I remember. I think here's a tweet from mine. Where is it? Here we go. Sign Favre, sign Moss, sign Harvin, sign Sidney Rice. Give the 2010 Vikings a second chance.
There you
go.
Because
a torn ACL was seen as best case scenario at the time.
Yeah.
There was an ambulance. There was players puking. There was the blood loss situation.
We went through this. I sent you a sticky note comparing the worst injuries of Vikings history and then obviously of recent NFL history. I think Joe Theismann kind of is the general consensus worst injury of all time when he shattered his leg. I believe it was Lawrence Taylor that hit him. That's kind of the general consensus as the worst injury of all time. Now, compared to Teddy Bridgewater, obviously you have to factor in advances in medicine. Teddy Bridgewater 20 years ago was not going to recover from this injury and never make it back to the football field. That's, so for, Theismann's injury can be considered worse to some extent simply because of the the medicine that he was dealing with. The post-injury rehabilitation process was considerably different. Everyone knows that. I don't need to say that, but Teddy Bridgewater's circumstances were about as bad as it gets in 2017. It's possibly the worst injury of all time, and it happened to the worst person it could happen to. Even if you think he's an average quarterback, he does not deserve any of that. You could say he's a bottom tier quarterback, but he is a top tier human being that absolutely deserves our trust and our support while he tries to rehab. And the fact that he is almost back on the field, whether you want that to be with the Vikings or not, it's extremely impressive that we are talking about that as a real possibility just 1 year later after, this catastrophic injury was widely considered to be career-threatening, life-threatening, everything on the table, and yet he's potentially on the verge of coming back to the Vikings.
Yeah, that would be cool. I think this is aside from the whole Teddy Sam debate. That's kind of it's pointless to bring up here because this is simply, I think, just it's
recognition more than anything.
For one thing, I think it's mostly recognizing how quickly he has recovered
and how quickly the franchise recovered too. That should be
both
noted
of those
as well.
Things. Both the franchise and Teddy himself are in a much better situation than we both thought the day of.
Yes.
Considering the circumstances, considering Sean Hill and Joel Staley were the only two healthy quarterbacks on the roster. Considering the rumors surrounding Teddy's injury, we had an ambulance. We had Eric Sugarman saving his life. We had all this stuff.
Why would you not react to the way that Rick Spielman did, knowing that the potential for his carear to be over and your Super Bowl window is only X years open, right?
That's the point. You have to think about that too. Spielman has no idea what this timetable is. Teddy's career could be over. He could be done for a year. He could be
and he was
done
reacting
for a few months. It could be for a few months, or it could be. I mean, we don't. He had no idea at the time, so he grabbed a guy.
At the time, we were freaking out about the potential of losing to the Packers at U.S. Bank Stadium. At the very least, Spielman saved that from happening.
He won that game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He definitely got that one. He saved the record books. I mean, we were a good team. The Vikings were a competitive football team last year, despite the 8-8 record. I wrote something back in December talking about how Bill Parcells' old line of you're 8-8, your record says who you are, right? That's if you're 4-10 or 6-10, you're a six. That's what you are. That was Bill Parcells' biggest thing, and obviously being one of Mike Zimmer's mentors, you saw Zimmer answer questions to that, effect, right? Do you believe this team is as good as a 10-6 team despite it being 8-8? And see, I do believe that last year's team was a 10-6 to 11-5 caliber team that just didn't function to the highest level during the right circumstances. And
that
if
home
they
Lions
had,
game, if Mike Zimmer manages the clock an ounce better, they're in the playoffs.
Yeah,
they win
at
that
9-7. So, I mean, I really think that Spielman did a heck of a job playing, his hands were tied behind his back, and he was able to basically pull a gun out of his pocket and shoot back. And while it wasn't necessarily, a season-changing, well, it was a season-changing move bringing Bradford in, because like you said, this could have easily been a 5-11 team if you don't bring him in. While the results weren't a postseason trip as we had hoped coming off of the previous year, I mean, I think the Vikings did a heck of a job, and I think Spielman put the Vikings in a position to have success not only last year, which to some degree they had some success last year. Some stuff will translate over to this year. The growing pains with Pat Shurmur last year, we got that out of the way. That's nice. And I think that he put the Vikings, more importantly, in a position to be competitive this year, which was kind of the important factor of bringing Sam Bradford over versus someone else. The way his contract was laid out, had the Vikings gave him an extra year of control. So I really think tied behind your back, hands tied behind your back, gun pointed to your head, and being able to sort of pick a gun out of your pocket and shoot back and just have an answer to the situation, I think it shuts down the people that want to get rid of Rick Spielman at a drop of a hat, right? This was a very difficult situation, and he did a great job manipulating it. And this team is poised to compete this year because of the decision that he made last year. So good for Rick Spielman. Good for Teddy Bridgewater for being way ahead of the rehabilitation pace that we expected. And good for the Vikings as a whole. This is still a competitive team because they were able to react and execute in a time of need despite, what we may have thought at the time. Like I said, I was not a fan of getting rid of a first and conditional fourth at that point, but I look back now and think, hey, this is probably the best possible move for the situation.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to sum it up there. It's just remarkable where the team is at and where Teddy is at both. Given the way it felt that day. But ultimately now it's just about Teddy Bridgewater getting healthy.
Yep, and we'll see what happens.
Seeing what happens. Yeah, I mean the future. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be next year. We don't know that yet.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there you go. That kind of ends on a cliffhanger, but I mean that's the beauty of sports, right? It's real life television.
Right.
Everything unfolds in front of your eyes, and there's no preview to next week's episode until it actually happens. So love watching this story. Honestly, it's been a fun storyline to follow. I mean, the Twitter stuff has been up and down, take it how it is, but I think it's been fun. It's kept the Vikings relevant. It's kept the Vikings relevant for about essentially the entire year, because there's always something to discuss when it comes to Teddy Bridgewater and Sam Bradford and how that dynamic will ultimately pan out. But for the time being, Sam Bradford is the quarterback. A year later, that is the biggest change that has been made to this franchise. Let's talk a little bit about how, first of all, Zimmer said that the Vikings might play their starters again this week. You talked on the roundtable. I don't want to regurgitate too much information here. Your thoughts on the roundtable, if you haven't watched that, you can check that out on YouTube, were simply that you're not a fan of it, that you think that, it's not the best idea. I'm with you on that, but do you think that we're actually going to see do you think it's a bluff, like Mike Zimmer's playing poker against the media per standard, or do you think he's actually considering playing Sam Bradford and co, Stephon Diggs, who had a poor game, again, just to kind of end on a better note in the preseason,
right.
I guess?
I feel like it might not be a bluff, but maybe I'm reading too much into this, because I remember, I think it might have been 2 years ago or last year, when he played Cordero Patterson in the fourth preseason game. And like I remember,
he was pissed.
There was a controversy about that because I know Patterson didn't want to, and Zimmer, I think, kind of was vocal about making sure he got out there. So he's, to an extent, has done this before, and it sounds like he, from what I have heard, he's made up his mind on the situation and has not told the players or the rest of the coaching staff. So we'll see about that. I don't know if that means anything. My take is still the same, as you'll see, or you now listening will see on the roundtable as well, that how the team performs in the third preseason game or any preseason game prior should not affect how you go into the fourth game. You play it safe. The fourth preseason game is for your bubble players who are fighting for a roster spot, and
right.
You're trying to evaluate them the best you can. So you play them as many, series.
The Vikings are very big on that too. Right, I mean they have some very important cuts to make at the back end of their 90-man round. I mean, they got to cut 37 players. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of bodies, and I mean there's
1,100 players cut or something stupid.
Right.
So.
I mean there are some very obvious guys that aren't going to make this team, like guys like the running back that they just brought in the other day, Hollins or I can't even remember his name, but Bronson Hill, I think that's his name. He's probably not going to make the team. Mitch Leidner, probably not going to make the team. So those are two really easy cuts that you can make. But you're right. This towards the bottom of the wide receiver depth chart. Are you truly going to cut both Rodney Adams and Stacey Coley, one of the two, maybe keep both of them? Does that mean you're cutting Jarius Wright? There's a lot of questions that you have to answer during this fourth game. And I don't really think that any of those questions revolve around the starters. I mean, Alex Boone hasn't been great. Mike Remmers hasn't been great. Harrison Smith was not at his best last week. I mean, but overall, I think that you have to plan to, complete your roster this week and just kind of hope that the progress that you've made since the beginning of training camp, since the beginning of OTAs even, wasn't reflected during that third preseason game, that it was – they weren't prepared. They said, Zimmer said it, they didn't game plan San Francisco. And it did pop up in a number of circumstances. I mean, when you saw them run the stunt and you saw both Mike Remmers and David Morgan kind of confused and basically forced out of position by the game plan that Kyle Shanahan had done and that his defensive coordinator had done. Stuff like that. That's probably not going to happen against Sean Payton once you evaluate how they run their defensive line and that type of stuff week one against the New Orleans Saints. So I'm with you. Sam Newman used the word punishment on the roundtable. I think it's hilarious because that's exactly what it would be, forcing them out there for a fourth game. You're going to punish your $20 million quarterback so that you can see him play better in another game that doesn't matter when you know what he can do when he's given proper protection and his receivers are catching the ball. I mean, I don't think Sam Bradford benefits from playing in week 4 of the preseason. I do think guys like Laquan Treadwell do, given that he's missed so much time. Mm-hmm. So I understand starters of Treadwell or Mackenzie Alexander's caliber getting some time in this game. But I think this I'm with you. I really do think that this is a game that you reserve more for the guys that are on the bubble. So I wouldn't expect Michael Floyd. I wouldn't play Michael Floyd in this game. He's already established himself as a guy that's going to be on the roster following his suspension.
Right.
So I don't see a reason to play him, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. It's just, I mean, Mike Zimmer is so unpredictable in this situation. I feel like he could do either put his starters out there for a series, try and send a message that way, or he's just bluffing, which wouldn't surprise me either. So I don't know. I don't really know what to expect, but I think some of these key position battles to look for, I think you mentioned wide receiver. In the Niners game, Jarius Wright did not play, I don't think, at all. Maybe a few snaps, but I mean, we don't know what that means. It probably either means
does it mean the same thing as TJ Clemmings is being out in the
right?
Seattle?
Exactly. It either means A, they know what they have in Jarius Wright, he's a lock on the team, and they're just getting other guys
like
reps,
Brian
or
Robinson.
B, Right, or B, they know what they have in him, and it means that they're going to cut him because they want to see these other guys get some reps and get some experience because they're going to be on the team, like Stacey Coley, Rodney Adams. So that's what, from kind of, I know we're going back to the Niners game here to kind of rehash those thoughts.
That's fine.
That's one thing I just think I'm going to be looking for the most out of this is some of these guys that, they do need to prove themselves. That defensive line, defensive tackle, there's going to be some questionable. That's not solidified yet. So those are just a couple positions I'm going to be looking for here on Thursday. But I think in the Niners game, we did see some of this stuff kind of surface, I guess.
All right, so before we take a look at Miami's actual roster, let's do this kind of to rehash the San Francisco game, but also look forward to the next game as well. Kind of play around with both games here, just the preseason as a whole, honestly. I'm going to give you a name, Drew, and you're going to say yes or no, as in referring to, do they have something to prove in this final game here? Is there something more that you need to see from this player? And you're going to give me a 1 to 2 sentence answer as to why you believe that, and then we're going to move forward, right? So we're going to go all over the place here. We're going to start with Dalvin Cook because for me, I'll kind of give you an example of what I'm setting up here. I don't think Dalvin Cook has anything left to prove. I see no reason for him to play in this last game against Miami. And I think
basically you're asking if this extra player should play,
right?
And then why?
Okay. So start with Dalvin Cook. I just gave you my reason for why he shouldn't play. I don't see any reason for him to play. I think you can agree with me that he's shown enough of his skill set. The Vikings did as much as possible against Buffalo to see everything out of Dalvin Cook, and over the last 3 weeks, we've seen a featured back quality player. So from Dalvin Cook, how about Latavius Murray? Do you think that he needs to play against Miami this week?
No, I don't think so. I think that'd be dumb. He's coming off an injury anyway. There's no reason to risk it again in a game that doesn't matter.
I think I disagree with you here. I think that his time off means that he could afford to play some snaps in this game. I wouldn't say maybe 2 series. I am fine with him not playing for the reason that Drew gave, but I think that I don't think he has anything necessarily to prove, but I think that he could afford to knock some more rust off coming off of injury. Let's move over to the wide receiver position now. Stephon Diggs coming off of a couple drops. Does he need to prove anything in this final game?
No, not at all. I don't even need to say anything.
Completely agree with you. All right, moving down the wide receiver depth chart, Rodney Adams and Stacey Coley, both those guys. I think the answer for both of them is yes, they're going to play in this game. How much time would you give them by quarter? So would you give them 1 quarter to play, 2 quarters to play, 3 quarters to play, in terms of where you're at in believing they are a 53-man lock? Are they a bubble player? What do you believe with those guys?
Coley and Adams, yeah. I think they're both bubble players by definition. So I'd play him the entire game, get him as much as possible. I'd try to run Rodney Adams, routes and not just gadget plays.
Right.
I think that if he can prove himself there, then I think it's a conversation. But right now, Coley's I think way ahead.
Okay, I'm with you. I'm with you on that reasoning as well. Let's go back to the running back position because I forgot about Jerick McKinnon. Does Jerick McKinnon need to play here? Does he need to see reps at kick returner, or did he solidify that role as either being Marcus Sherrills' backup on kick return or simply being the guy as a kick returner, and does he need to see some time at running back as well?
I think let's give him another kick return rep. I think it's his job, but I think mostly too, just having 2 guys already set out at running back, you might just need a body. I mean, it doesn't mean he has to play a lot, but just have him there in case something, in case of an emergency, maybe. I don't know.
I think I agree with you as well. I think that Terrell Newby will probably get most of the run at the running back position this week because we know what we have in Dalvin Cook and Latavius Murray, as we already covered. Jerick McKinnon, we already know to some degree as well, but I think that he will get some first quarter reps since he is the number 3 running back technically at this point, which means that unless you want to run Terrell Newby the entire game, which,
right.
I mean, you could, but if you've watched Newby at all, you kind of know who he is at this point. I see him as a no-doubt cut. I don't see any reason to keep him. I don't think he really has a future in the NFL simply because of his size. I don't think he's big enough, strong enough to compete at this level. So, from there, let's. How about quarterbacks? How about Case Keenum? How much does Case Keenum play this game?
None. Doesn't need to play. I think he's fine.
Taylor Heineke. So Taylor Heineke is probably your starter then, I would assume.
Yeah, I'd go Heineke first half, Ladner second
Assuming
half.
He's not injured. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's. How about the offensive line? of the starters specifically, so assuming that the starting group is Riley Reif, Alex Boone, let's slot in Pat Elflein as the starting center, and then you've got Joe Berger at right guard and Mike Remmers at right tackle. That's likely going to be your week 1 starting offensive line, whether you like it or not. Do any of those 5 need to play any reps in this game?
No. I don't see any reason. Maybe Remmers and for some pass pro stuff, but I mean, if I had to,
Elflein as a rookie? No, you think you're good?
I don't think so. I'm good there. I think I've seen enough.
I've definitely seen enough out of Riley Reif. I've seen enough out of Alex Boone to know that both of those guys are likely going to be fine despite the injury issues with Reif and the struggles with Boone. I wouldn't mind seeing Elflein get some more reps at center. I'm not opposed to seeing him get some reps at guard too.
That's a good point. Yeah, because I think from the coaching staff has alluded to having interior offensive linemen be able to move around. Right. So I get that one, I guess.
Right. And that's, the same can be said about Nick Easton as well.
Right.
Mike Remmers, I don't think he needs to play. I know he hasn't exactly yielded much optimism for us thus far. It's been kind of a perfect storm of disaster with Mike Remmers through the first 3 preseason games, but I don't think there's a whole lot you can change against the second team of the Miami Dolphins. Cameron Wake's not going to be out there, for example, for him to get a tune-up against, so I don't see any reason for Mike Remmers to be out there. I think he just got to battle the demons inside him, honestly. So from there, let's flip over. Tight end position. Bucky Hodges, Kyle Carter, Kyle Rudolph, any of those guys. Who needs to play, who doesn't need to play, who has something to prove, who doesn't need to prove anything.
I think I'm mostly just playing Carter and Hodges. Those are my 2 tight ends, and then Truesdell as well. Those 3 guys are getting the run. No need to see Morgan. No need to see Rudolph. I think Rudolph's hurt anyway, so no need for those 2 guys.
I'm with you there as well. All right, let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball. The defensive line, any of the starters, you need to see anything from them? Danielle Hunter, Linval
Nope.
Joseph, Tom Johnson,
No,
Emerson Griffin.
absolutely not.
I wouldn't play any of them. I'd let Deshaun Bauer run free. I'd give Stephen Weatherly a firm evaluation this game to really know what you're getting with him if you decide to keep
full game for those 2.
Right. Absolutely. You need to get full evaluations from both of those players. In the interior, I'd love to see Jaleel Johnson play a lot because it seems like he's going to be a rotation guy to start the season. So you're not, if you do lose him to injury, that sucks. But you're not decimating your 3 technique depth chart by losing Jaleel Johnson. So I'd give him a ton of run for the same reason that I'd give guys like Laquan Treadwell a lot of run, just simply because they're important players that need to get more reps. That's where I'm at with guys like Jaleel Johnson. And then as I just did, I hop back over to the offensive side of the ball with Laquan Treadwell. But Detone Jones, I think, is going to get a ton of reps to this week. I see Jaleel Johnson getting a ton of reps. Will Sutton as well. I think Tom Johnson is probably done for the preseason. Fine. Yeah, he's good. Yeah. Brian Robinson, obviously, good to go. Let's move over to the linebacker spot. Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks. Do they need to play this week?
Absolutely not. No, that'd be dumb.
They had some miscommunication stuff last week. I don't see that as a reason to punish them for an extra week. I don't think either of those guys should play. Ben Gideon, Elijah Lee, that second tier of guys. Eric Wilson as well. Who needs to play from that group? Who really needs to pop in your eyes to make this 53?
Yeah, I mean, Emmanuel Lemur needs to play. I'd put Gideon out there, Edmund Robinson out there. Yeah, that's true. Lemur is hurt. But Elijah Lee out there. Yeah, you get all those guys out there. Eric Wilson. Those are all bubble guys, essentially. So, they got to get
Edmund Robinson as well. Despite being arguably a starter, he's still kind of a bubble guy because if he isn't the starter, he could lose his job entirely because you're going to roster Ben Gideon. He's proved enough to this point that he's going to at least be the backup. So, basically, it's Emmanuel Lemur, Edmund Robinson at that starting weak side position here. That's what it's coming down to really here. And Elijah Lee, probably a practice squad guy. Eric Wilson, borderline 53-man roster guy. He's got to get some work in as well.
Right.
Cornerback position. Xavier Rhodes and Terrence Newman probably good to go.
Yeah, you don't need to see them.
How about Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander? One guy coming off of injury, one guy who just simply hasn't performed at anywhere close to a solid level to date.
Mackenzie needs to play. Trey Waynes does not.
Fair enough. I agree with you as
yeah.
well. I'm good on Trey Waynes as well. I don't see any reason for him to play. Moving it back out to the safeties, I'm just going to eliminate Harrison Smith and Anderson Dejo as is. I don't see any reason for either of those guys to play in this game. No reason risking your two starting safeties getting hurt. Who are your starting two safeties then? Who, I guess not necessarily who are the starters. If it's not Harrison Smith and Anderson Dejo, who are the guys that are going to get the most reps this week? Anthony Harris, J-Ron Curse, Jack Tocho. There's a lot of guys that need to get reps. We have some questions answered with Curse and Harris in terms of what they're able to do as backups. Who are you evaluating the hardest, I guess, at the safety position?
I think Anthony Harris is on the verge of losing his spot here just because Antoine Exum has become versatile in that slot role, and he can. If the Vikings plan on keeping four safeties, I would assume Exum is included in there. So I think Harris is the guy that would get booted there. So I think Harris needs to get a lot of run. I think Curse is pretty safe. So I would put Curse in there for maybe the first half and have Tocho get safety run in the second half there. So because I think Exum's on the team at this point. So that's kind of what I would do, I guess, for the safeties.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think that J-Ron Curse needs to get some work in, but he's probably the most rosterable, if that's a word, of the three guys you just named. Well, of the four guys, really. I would take J-Ron Curse first, then probably Antoine Exum, then Anthony Harris in terms of my backup safety depth chart, simply because I like the versatility that these guys show versus Anthony Harris, who falls a little bit behind Antoine Exum because he's really only a free safety, whereas Exum can be a free safety, a nickel quarterback. He can do some stuff in the box as well. He's bigger, so that simply helps his case. So Anthony Harris definitely has a lot to prove this game. So from this little game that we've played, let's now work into the actual game itself. We're playing the Miami Dolphins Thursday night, 7 p.m. Obviously, we just went over how few starters we expect to play. I think a lot will be the same for Miami. It'll be interesting to see if Jay Cutler plays because he does need to shake off the rust. As you all know, Jay Cutler was recently acquired by the Miami Dolphins, teaming up with his guy Adam Gase, the former offensive coordinator with the Chicago Bears. So he knows the playbook and stuff, but in terms of being ready to go from a physical standpoint, I think Jay Cutler could afford to play in this game. But that being said, I think we'll see Matt Moore.
Yeah, I don't see any reason for them to play Jay Cutler at all. That'd be... It's dumb.
Asking for another. The Dolphins are kind of in the same situation as the Vikings were last year. And you don't want to put Jay Cutler out there just to get another starting caliber quarterback hurt before the season even starts. I'm taking the safe approach, even though Matt Moore, he is one of the better backups in the entire league. So he is a quote borderline number one starter. In terms of being like in the overall quarterback rankings, I would say Matt Moore is like ranks in like the 30 to 35 area, where he could be a starter for a team that's bad enough, but at the same time he doesn't offer a whole lot of upside. You know what he is, but point being here is you can play Matt Moore and get the feel of a first-team offense. So I don't expect to see guys like Jay Ajayi out there, the prolific running back out of Boise State. I don't expect to see any of their starting offensive linemen, Laramie Tunsil, Mike Pouncey, Juwan James. Those are the big names on that offensive line. Jarvis Landry, he's not only on the trading block, so that's one reason not to play him, because if you're trying to trade a guy, he obviously can't be hurt. So I don't see a chance that he plays. Kenny Stills and Devontae Parker, I could see getting some time, but I don't.
Not Parker. Probably Parker won't.
Parker has probably elevated himself to the point where he's not going to play here. So you're probably seeing Leonte Carew, Demore Stringfellow, who runs. He caught the 99-yard touchdown earlier this preseason. Dude can absolutely burn. And then Mitch Matthews is probably a guy that's worth keeping an eye on as well from their wide receiver depth chart.
Former Viking.
What's that?
Former Viking. He was on the Vikings roster earlier this year. So.
Right. I think we'll see a lot of David Fales. That's a former Bear, I believe, that's now with the Miami Dolphins, probably fighting for a 53-man roster spot. Probably see a lot of Kenyon Drake, which could be exciting, the former Alabama guy that can, he's electric whenever he touches the ball. Any thoughts on this Miami Dolphins offense, Drew? Obviously, it's mostly second and third team guys. What do you see them bringing to the table in terms of, once again, evaluating these guys on the bubble end of the roster?
Right. I think we've talked a lot about the Vikings defending tight ends.
Right.
They struggled last season with that quite a bit. The linebackers did, and these depth guys will get a chance to defend. I think he's an athletic tight end, Marquise Gray, former Gopher.
Former Viking.
I'm assuming he's going to be their full-time tight end in this game. So I would look at the linebackers and the safeties defending Marquise Gray, see how if the Vikings can keep him contained. But that's, I liked Isaac Asiata, the Utah guard, Matt Asiata's cousin. Looks like the Miami Dolphins have picked him up in the draft, and I'm assuming he'll see a lot of run there at right guard. So there's another, player to watch as well.
If you're a baseball fan, Miami also rosters Trey Griffey, which is Ken Griffey Jr. III, as in Ken Griffey Jr.'s son. Former, I believe, a 4-star recruit. Didn't really show a whole lot in college. I think he went to Notre Dame. I'm not 100% on that. No, sorry. I think he went to Arizona. I think it was Torrey Hunter's kid that went to Notre Dame, right? Yeah. Anyways, regardless, if you're a baseball fan, that's a guy to root for. Obviously, he's not nearly the prolific athlete that his father was, but if you're interested in simply family ties, that type of thing, Trey Griffey is a guy to keep an eye out. Let's move over to the Miami defensive side of the ball as we wrap up this show here. You're probably not going to see Ndamukong Suh. You're not going to see Cameron Wake, but Drew, are there any guys on this defensive side of the ball that you're excited to take a look at, either from a fan perspective or simply from an analytical perspective, in terms of evaluating the final guys on the Vikings roster? Who appeals to you on that second and third team level?
From a fan perspective, Brandon Watts looks like he'll be getting some run, so that'll be fun to see him and how he's kind of progressed.
Yes.
Also going to look, let's see, who was I going to look? Well, I had his name in my, Ray Maluga. I think he was one of those guys that the Vikings had considered at least to bring in a linebacker, and I don't think they ended up doing that, but
right.
They didn't bring in a linebacker, did they?
No.
So that was a name that was considered to have him in the middle, and then Kendricks was going to be kicked outside. And Ultron Werner is another one too. That corner, he was another guy that was rumored, and it looks like he'll be getting some run as well. So just a couple guys I'll be watching there.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with you on the cornerback depth charts to start out with. I'm really excited to see Cordrea Tankersley. That's a former Clemson cornerback. Obviously, he played opposite of Mackenzie Alexander, so there's some ties there as well. I really liked his game coming out of Clemson. I thought that he was going to be a lockdown corner. He hasn't asserted himself on this depth chart yet, so he'll probably get plenty of time. Obviously, he's going to make the roster regardless, but I'm just excited to see where he's at. Tony Lippett at the bottom of the cornerback depth chart for the Miami Dolphins as well intrigues me because he's a former wide receiver at Michigan State. I remember evaluating him and trying to kind of connect the dots between him making the transition from wide receiver to cornerback at the NFL level, and he's actually been fairly sufficient, so I like watching him a lot. Same can be said about Xavier Howard, who's actually at the top of the Dolphins cornerback depth chart. I don't expect to see him or Byron Maxwell this week, but if we do, either one of those guys represents a treat and a good test for a guy like Stacey Coley on the outside to run against. So I like all of those guys. Raekwon McMillan is the final guy I mentioned. Ohio State product. Really like him. He's currently tabbed in as a starter for the Dolphins, so I think there's a chance that we won't see him this week.
Right.
But at the same time, he's a rookie. We don't necessarily. I don't watch the Miami Dolphins like a hawk, so I don't know where they're at in terms of evaluating him this year. Obviously, he is in the starting lineup currently, but a lot of things could change. A lot of things could be shifting around. They just lost Ryan Tannehill, and Jay Cutler's all of a sudden their quarterback. I don't think it would be the craziest thing in the world for them to start a rookie that is tabbed in to be their week one starter just to get a little bit more from him, see what they have. Because that linebacker depth chart there could be pretty impressive when you also match him with Kiko Alonso. And then you already mentioned Ray Maluga, and there's some talent on that depth chart. Lawrence Timmons, the former Steeler as well, veteran guy that you probably won't see this week, but regardless, a lot of fun, talented players on both sides of the ball. Should be an excellent game. Since we didn't do a score prediction last week, and thankfully, that's probably for the best, given that I don't think either one of us would have came close to 32-31 as a final. Let's try again this week in arguably the most meaningless game of the year from a scoreboard from a scoreboard perspective, I want you to give me a final score of this Vikings game. Will Mike Zimmer push his preseason win total to 15?
Yeah, he will. Just because, I mean, there's literally no way to predict preseason games. So we'll go, since it's going to be mostly backup guys, 20 to 16 Vikings. Just pulling something out of my backside for that one.
I'm going to say 24 to let's say they're going to probably, let's say 15. They're going to go for, Miami's going to go for 2 at one point. No field goals allowed. So 24 to 15 Vikings win. Mike Zimmer gets his 15th win in 4 years during the preseason, which is pretty impressive, especially for a guy that doesn't care about the preseason. And the Vikings cruise into week 1 against the New Orleans Saints with new life, hopefully. I expect this to be a much cleaner game, even though the backup guys are probably going to be the primary focus of this game coming up on Thursday. So we will have a post-game discussion live on Friday, and we'll also have another roundtable as well. I think the game plan for that is to do that more frequently here. We've been a little bit off on that. So if you are a fan of the roundtable, there'll be more of that coming up sooner rather than later. And you can look forward to our rapid reaction podcast on Friday from the final, our final thoughts, and probably we'll do some 53-man roster stuff as well coming off of that game. So look forward to that. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, every place that I've mentioned in the first 99 podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. We're happy to have made it to 100 shows, and we're happy to continue serving you guys with brand new, fresh Vikings content 3 times a week at this point, and we're really looking forward to the regular season. So we'll check you guys out later on this week.